And joining us now to discuss is Hal Kempfer, retired Marine intelligence officer and host of the Strat podcast. Hal, thanks for joining us. It's always great to have you, especially on a Sunday with such important topics to discuss. So let's get into it. Putin in China this week for the security summit, right? And this comes as it launches more aerial attacks on Ukraine. So what's the significance of this meeting with other world leaders at this point in the war? It's always significant for these meetings, but how about right now?
Well, right now, Laura, it's very significant. The SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it's been around for about 24 years, but you have India there, Modi's there, he got a red carpet treatment, Putin's coming in, red carpet treatment. Kim Jong-un's going to be there, which is kind of interesting. But this is almost seen as like a counterpart to some of the Western alliances. And this is coming right up to Monday's deadline, as President Macron just publicly reminded President Trump. He said, hey, Monday's the day that you said you make a decision on these secondary tariffs. If those secondary tariffs were imposed, they would hit primarily China and India, two of the biggest, countries there. Their leaders are there. So there is much to discuss. And of course, all that aimed at Russia and Putin. So you have those three leaders all at this thing, and they're all going to be talking about it. And there is political pressure from Europe and elsewhere on President Trump to take action.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about President Trump's comments that a meeting between Zelenskyy and Putin is, quote, unlikely at this point. Zelenskyy has said he is willing to meet, but if Russia isn't, how can a deal be reached?
Well, there really doesn't seem to be any momentum. They had the big meeting in Alaska. You had the meeting that took place the Monday afterwards with all the European leaders coming in. And then Russia kind of drifted right back into its maximalist goals, aims, typical rhetoric. So now there really doesn't seem to be any momentum for a meeting. They did look, I think Secret Service went over to Budapest, looked at that as a possible venue, but nothing's happening. And right now, Russia's in a full push. They're buying time, but they're in a summer offensive, and there's talk of them trying to do some sort of fall offensive. And as long as Putin thinks he's winning on the battlefield, and I'm going to just say that his interpretation of winning at those costs is just stunning. But as long as he thinks he's winning, he's going to keep pushing with the military goals. And actually, that's kind of what President Trump has alluded to, is that Russia appears to want to keep fighting.
Yeah, I wanted to read you some comments from the Kremlin spokesperson today, and here it is, saying, quote, the European War Party maintains its main trend. They do not calm down. This is in stark contrast to the approach, for example, that our president, President Putin, adheres to, and with the U.S. President Trump as well. He later adds the Europeans are hindering these efforts. Okay, so that's the quote. What do you think Russia's tactic is here, putting that out?
Well, Russia has the typical tactic, which is deny everything, make counter accusations. And that's kind of what Peskov is famous for that. He just turns the whole thing upside down, and it makes no rational sense. But that is kind of the Russian, or I should say the Kremlin narrative, is to somehow blame the Europeans as being warmongers, to blame NATO for somehow being responsible for this war happening. And he's trying to get back in that. But again, they're trying to buy time. And they were rather encouraged when they came out of, when Putin came out of the Alaska meeting, that President Trump dropped the requirement for immediate ceasefire and started talking about a broader peace agreement. And some of the rhetoric that was coming out of that sounded very much like things that Putin had said, but it was coming from President Trump. So they felt that they had made some progress there. And I think that, again, bolstered Putin's sort of recalcitrance to actually engage in a meaningful way.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens next, and we will follow you along on your podcast. Hal Kempfer, retired Marine intelligence officer and host of the Strat podcast. Be sure to check it out. Thank you very much for your time today. Always appreciate it.